Good morning, Internet. How you doing today? Jeremy Reads Aloud Self-Help Books back again with another reading of this awesome book that I've been reading on this channel where I read inspirational books. The book is called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover by Robert Moore and Doug Gillette. Gillette author. How to awaken the basically rediscovering the archetypes of the mature masculine. Pardon me. Sip of my coffee. We're on page 79, chapter 6, The Warrior. Subheading, The Warrior in His Fullness. Here we go. The Warrior in His Fullness. The characteristics of the warrior in his fullness amount to a total way of life, what the samurai called ado, pronounced do, pardon me, I'll repronounce that, ado. These characteristics constitute the warrior's dharma, ma'at, or Tao, a spiritual or psychological path through life. We have already mentioned aggressiveness as one of the warrior's characteristics. Aggressiveness is a stance toward life that rouses, energizes, and motivates. It pushes us to take the offensive and to move out of a defensive or quote-unquote holding position about life's tasks and problems. The samurai advice was always to quote-unquote leap into battle with the full potential of ki, or quote-unquote vital energy, at your disposal. The Japanese warrior tradition claimed that there is only one position in which to face the battle of life, frontally, and it also proclaimed that there was only one direction, forward. In the famous opening scene of Patton, the general, in full battle gear, pearl-handled revolver on his hips, is giving a motivational speech to his army. Patton warns his troops that he is not interested in their holding their position in battle. He says, "I don't want to get any messages saying that we are holding our position. We are advancing." Page 80. "We're advancing constantly. We are not interested in holding on to anything except the enemy. We're going to hold on to him by the nose, and we're going to kick him in the ass. We're going to kick the hell out of him all the time, and we're going to go through him like crap through a goose." Proper aggressiveness in the right circumstances strategically advantageous to the goal at hand, is already half the battle. How does the man accessing the warrior know what aggressiveness is appropriate under the circumstances? He knows through clarity of thinking, through discernment, through discernment, the warrior is always alert. He is always awake. He is never sleeping through life. He knows how to focus his mind and his body. He is what the samurai called, quote-unquote, mindful. He is a, quote-unquote, hunter in the Native American tradition. As Don Juan, the Yaqui Indian warrior sorcerer in Carlos Castaneda's Journey to Ixtlan, says, a warrior knows what he wants, and he knows how to get it. As a function of his clarity of mind, he is a strategist and a tactician. He can evaluate his circumstances accurately, and then adapt himself to the quote-unquote situation on the ground, as we say. An example of this is the phenomenon of guerrilla warfare, an ancient tradition, but one that has come into increasing use since the 18th century. The rebellious colonists adopted this technique in the American Revolutionary War. The communists in China and later in Vietnam, under the guidance of the master strategist Ho Chi Minh, used it with stunning success to defeat the more cumbersome military operations of his enemies. Most recently, the Afghan resistance fighters used the strategy to drive the Soviet army out of their country. The warrior knows when he has the force to defeat his opponent by conventional means, and when he must adopt an unconventional strategy. He accurately accesses his own strength and skill. If he finds that a frontal assault will not work, he deflects his opponent's assault, spots the weakness in his flank, and then quote unquote leaps into battle. Here is the difference between the warrior and the hero. The man or the boy accessing the hero, as we've said, does not know his limitations. He is romantic about his invulnerability. The warrior, however, through his clarity of thinking, realistically assesses his capacities and his limitations in any given situation. In the Bible, King David, up against the superior force of the armies of Saul, at first avoided direct confrontation with Saul's troops, allowing, here's a brief break for the illustration here on page 81. Achilles and Patroclus, internal medallion of cup illustration by Greek Sosius painter, ca. 500 BCE, courtesy of Anne Museum, Berlin, Staatlich Museum Prüfster Kulturbesitz, Photo Ute Jung. Pardon me if I didn't pronounce that. Back to page 82. So we were talking about King Saul's troops allowing, page 82, allowing Saul to wear himself out pursuing him. David and his ragtag band were guerrillas, living off the land and moving fast. Then David, evaluating his situation clearly, fled Saul's kingdom and went over to the Philistine king. From this position, he had the force of thousands of Philistine soldiers behind him. He had put himself into position to checkmate Saul. Then again, through his accurate assessment of the situation at the time, David re-entered Saul's kingdom, gathered his own troops, and waited for Saul's collapse. Sometimes the maxim, quote-unquote, forward, always forward, means shifting tactics. It means a flexibility of strategy that comes from razor-sharp evaluation. Modern fencing uses this kind of flexibility. Not only does the fencer train his body, he trains his mind as well. He learns to think with lightning speed, to look for the unguarded points in his opponent's stances and lunges. Then he parries, attacks, and scores his hits. A young college man reported that after he took up fencing, his classroom performance improved. He was able to spot with lightning-swift clarity the major themes in a complex lecture, evaluate the weaknesses in the supporting arguments, challenge statements with a sharpness of vision and a self-confidence he'd never known before, and force his professors and fellow students to either talk sense or drop their arguments. He knew then what he wanted to learn, and he knew how to do it, to get it. The warrior traditions all affirm that, in addition to training, what enables a warrior to reach clarity of thought is living with the awareness of his own imminent death. The warrior knows the shortness of life and how fragile it is. A man under the guidance of the warrior knows how few his days are. Rather than depressing him, this awareness leads him to an outpouring of life force and an intense experience of his life that is unknown to others. Every act counts. Every deed is done as if it were the last. The samurai swordsmen were taught to live their lives as if they were already dead. Castanada's Don Juan taught that there is, quote-unquote, no time for anything but meaningful acts if we live with death as our, quote-unquote, our eternal companion. There is no time for hesitation. This sense of the imminence of death energizes the man accessing the warrior energy to take decisive action. This means that he engages life. He never withdraws from it. Pardon me. He doesn't, page 83, he doesn't think too much. Because thinking too much can lead to doubt, and doubt to hesitation, and hesitation to inaction. Inaction can lead to losing the battle. The man who is a warrior avoids self-consciousness, as we usually define it. His actions become second nature. They become unconscious reflex actions, but they are actions he has trained for through the exercise of enormous self-discipline. This is how Marines are made. A good Marine is one who can make split-second decisions and then act decisively. Part of what goes into acting decisively in any life situation, along with aggressiveness, clarity of thinking, and the awareness of one's own death, is training. The warrior energy is concerned with skill, power, and accuracy, and with control, both inner and outer, psychological and physical. The warrior energy is concerned with training men to be all that they can be, in their thoughts, feelings, speech, and actions. Unlike the hero's actions, the warrior's actions are never overdone, never dramatic for the sake of drama. The warrior never acts to reassure himself that he is as potent as he hopes he is. The warrior never spends more energy than he absolutely has to, and he doesn't talk too much. Yul Brynner's character in the movie The Magnificent Seven is a study in trained self-control. He says little, moves with the physical control of a predator, attacks only the enemy, and has absolute mastery over the technology of his trade. That is another aspect of the warrior's interest and skill, his mastery of the technology that enables him to reach his goal. He has developed skill with the weapons he uses to implement his decisions. His control is, first of all, over his mind and his attitudes. If these are right, the body will follow. A man accessing the warrior archetype has a positive mental attitude, as they say in sales training. This means that he has an unconquerable spirit, that he has great courage, that he is fearless, that he takes responsibility for his actions, and that he has self-discipline. Discipline means that he has the rigor to develop control and mastery over his mind and over his body, and that he has the capacity to withstand pain, both psychological and physical. He is willing to suffer to achieve what he wants to achieve. Quote unquote, no pain, no gain, we say. Whether you are literally a hunter, crouched for hours in the same position, in the chill early morning of the Kalahari waiting for, page 84. Waiting for your prey to come within range, or whether you're a triathlon trainee, a medical school student, an executive enduring the misguided attacks of your board members, or a husband trying to work out difficulties with your wife, you know that discipline of your mind and perhaps your body is essential. The warrior energy also shows, also shows that we can call a transpersonal commitment. His loyalty is to something, a cause, a god, a people, a task, a nation larger than individuals, though that transpersonal loyalty may be focused through some important person, like a king. In the Arthurian stories, Lancelot, though fiercely devoted to Arthur and to Guinevere, is ultimately committed to the ideal of chivalry and to the god who lies behind such things as noble quests, might for right, and the lifting up of the oppressed. Of course, because of his love for Guinevere, Lancelot unwittingly acts to destroy the beneficiary of his transpersonal commitment. Camelot, but he does so because he has encountered the paradoxically personal and transpersonal goal of romantic love. By then, he has already lost his access to the warrior energy and has ceased being a knight. This transpersonal commitment reveals a number of other characteristics of the warrior energy. First, it makes all personal relationships relative. That is, it makes them less central than the transpersonal commitment. Thus, the psyche of the man who is adequately accessing the warrior is organized around his central commitment. This commitment eliminates a great deal of human pettiness. Living in the light of lofty ideals and spiritual realities such as God, democracy, communism, freedom, or any other worthy transpersonal commitment so alters the focus of a man's life that petty squabbling and personal ego concerns no longer matter much. There is a story about a samurai attached to the household of a great lord. His lord has been murdered by a man from a rival house, and the samurai was sworn to avenge his lord's death. After tracking the assassin for some time, after great personal sacrifice and hardship, and after braving many dangers, the samurai found the murderer. He drew his sword to kill the man, but in that instant the assassin spit in his face. The samurai stepped back, sheathed his sword, and turned and walked away. Why? Page 85. He walked away because he was angry that he had been spat on. He would have killed the assassin in that moment out of his own personal anger, not out of his commitment to the ideal his lord represented. His execution of the man would have been out of his ego and his own feelings, not out of the warrior within. So in order to be true to the warrior calling, he had to walk away and let the murderer live. The warrior's loyalty, then, and his sense of duty are to something beyond and other than himself and his own concerns. The hero's loyalty, as we have seen, is really to himself, to impressing himself with himself and to impressing others. In this connection, too, the man accessing the warrior is ascetic. He lives a life exactly the opposite of most human lives. He lives not to gratify his personal needs and wishes or his physical appetites, but to hone himself into an efficient spiritual machine, trained to bear the unbearable in the service of the transpersonal goal. We know the legends of the founders of the great faiths, Christianity and Buddhism. Jesus had to resist the temptations Satan pictured to him in the wilderness, and the Buddha had to endure his 3 temptations under the bo tree. These men were spiritual warriors. Spiritual warriors abound in human history. The religion of Islam as a whole is built on warrior energy. Muhammad was a warrior. His followers are, to this day, still drawing on warrior energy as they wage jihad against the powers of evil, as they define them. The God of Islam, even though he is addressed as, quote-unquote, the merciful and, quote-unquote, the compassionate, is a warrior God. We see the same warrior energy manifested in the Jesuit order in Christianity, which for centuries taught self-negation for the sake of carrying God's message into the most hostile and dangerous areas of the world. The man who is a warrior is devoted to his cause, his God, his civilization, even unto death. The devotion to the transpersonal ideal or goal, even to the point of personal annihilation, leads a man to another of the warrior's characteristics. He is emotionally distant as long as he is in the warrior. This does not mean that the man accessing the warrior in his fullness is cruel, just that he does not make his decisions and implement them out of emotional relatedness to anyone or anything except his ideal. He is, as Don Juan says, unavailable or inaccessible, as he says to be, page 86. To be inaccessible means that you touch the world around you sparingly with emotional detachment. This attitude is part of the clarity of the warrior's thinking too. He looks at his tasks, his decisions, and his actions dispassionately and unemotionally. Samurai training involved the following kind of psychological exercise. Whenever the teaching went, you feel yourself frightened or despairing, don't say to yourself, I am afraid, or I am despairing. Say, there is someone who is afraid, or there is someone who is despairing. Now, what can he do about this? This detached way of experiencing a threatening situation objectifies the situation and allows for a clearer and more strategically advantageous view of it. The warrior is then able to act with less regard for his personal feelings. He will act more forcefully, swiftly, and efficiently with himself out of the way. Often in life, we need to, quote unquote, step back, we say, from a situation in order to gain perspective, so that we can act. The warrior needs room to swing his sword. He needs separation from his opponents in the outer world and from his own inner opponents in the form of negative emotions. Boxers in the ring are separated by the referee when they get too close to each other and engage each other in body locks. The warrior is often a destroyer, but the positive warrior energy destroys only what needs to be destroyed in order for something new and fresh, more alive and more virtuous to appear. Many things in our world need destroying: corruption, tyranny, oppression, injustice, obsolete and despotic systems of government, corporate hierarchies that get in the way of the company's performance, unfulfilling lifestyles and job situations, bad marriages. And in the very act of destroying, often the warrior energy is building new civilizations, new commercial, artistic, and spiritual ventures for humankind, new relationships. When the warrior energy is connected with the other mature masculine energies, something truly splendid emerges. When the warrior is connected with the king, the man accessing these powers is consciously stewarding the realm, and his decisive actions, clarity of thinking, discipline, and courage are, in fact, creative and generative. At this moment in history, we need only to think of Mikhail Gorbachev, warrior and king, struggling against the inertia of the Soviet system, standing in the center, making war on the old and inefficient. Page 87, generating generative and more vigorous, shepherding his people into a new era they themselves would not have the courage to face without his leadership, without his access to these two mature masculine energies. The warrior's interface with the magician archetype is what enables a man to achieve such mastery and control over himself and his weapons. It is what allows him to channel and direct power to accomplish his goals. His admixture with the lover energy gives the warrior compassion and a sense of connectedness with all things. The lover is the masculine energy that brings a man back into relatedness with human beings in all their frailty and vulnerability. The lover makes the man under the influence of the warrior compassionate at the same time that he is doing his duty. Here we have the images, so dramatically captured for us on television, of the American GIs in Vietnam, after having bombed and strafed a Viet Cong village, carrying the children out on their hips and administering first aid to their wounded enemies. There's a powerful scene in the movie Full Metal Jacket, in which several GIs have cornered and fatally wounded a Viet Cong sniper, a woman, as it turns out, who has killed several of their buddies. One of the characters feels compassion for his moments ago enemy. She is writhing in agony, saying her prayers, preparing for death, and begging him to shoot her to put her out of her misery. The GI is torn between letting her die an agonizing death and helping her by finishing her off. In the end, he shoots her, not out of anger, but out of compassion. Alliance with the lover produces other humane influences in the warrior energy. Marcus Aurelius was a philosopher. Winston Churchill was a painter. The Japanese artist warrior Mishima was a poet. Even General Patton was a poet. He recited one of his eulogies to General Bradley at the site of the ancient North African battlefield, upon which 2,000 years earlier the Romans had defeated the Carthaginians. Patton claimed in his mystical poem that he had been there then and had taken part in the battle. When, however, the warrior is operating on his own, unrelated to these other archetypes, the results for the mortal man accessing even the positive warrior, the warrior in his fullness, can be disastrous. As we have said, the warrior in his pure form is emotionally detached. His, page 88. His transpersonal loyalty radically relativizes the importance of a man's human relationships. This is apparent in the warrior's attitude towards sex. Women, for the warrior, are not for relating to, for being intimate with. They are for fun. We've all heard the marching chant, "This is my rifle and this is my gun. This is for fighting and this is for fun." This attitude explains the prevalence of prostitutes around military camps. It also explains the horrific tradition of the raping of conquered women. Even if he has a family, the human warrior's devotion to other duties often leads to marital problems. The story of the lonely and rejected serviceman's wife is one we've seen time and time again in the movies. We need only recall Gordo Cooper's estrangement from his wife, Trudy, as portrayed in the movie The Right Stuff. This same thing occurs outside the military as well, in the relationships and families of men whose professions call for a great deal of transpersonal devotion and long hours of disciplined work and self-sacrifice. Ministers, doctors, lawyers, politicians, dedicated salespeople, and many others have emotionally devastating personal lives. Their wives and girlfriends often feel alienated and rejected, competing hopelessly with the man's quote-unquote true love, his work. In addition, these men, true to the warrior's sexual attitudes, often have affairs with their nurses, staffers, receptionists, secretaries, and other women who admire, from a safe, sometimes not so safe, distance, their masculine warrior proficiency and dedication. Page 88, we'll stop here, take a little break. Tune in next video, another day I'll be reading the subheading, The Shadow Warrior, the Sadist and the Masochist. We're reading chapter 6, The Warrior, and the book is called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, Rediscovering the Archetypes of the Mature Masculine by Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette. I encourage you to get the book yourself. Click the Amazon link in the description. This is Jeremy Reads Aloud, Self-Help Books. Young men, have an awesome week today. Have a transformative week, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Bye.